1865, New Mexico Territory. Charlotte Dalton was waist-deep in mud when she heard the laughter. She'd been trying to cross the shallow part of the river to check her fence line, same as she'd done 100 times before. But the summer rains had turned the bank treacherous, and one wrong step sent her sinking fast into thick brown muck that sucked at her skirts and held her fast. The more she struggled, the deeper she sank, until she was trapped up to her waist, arms flailing for balance, hair falling from its pins in honey blonde tangles around her flushed face. And then she heard it. A low, rich chuckle from somewhere above her on the bank. Charlotte's head snapped up, bright blue eyes flashing with equal parts embarrassment and fury. A man sat astride a dusty gray horse, looking down at her predicament with obvious amusement. He was tall and lean, probably early 30s, with sandy brown hair that curled slightly under a tan cowboy hat. His hazel eyes crinkled at the corners as he tried, and failed to suppress his grin. He wore a faded blue work shirt with the sleeves rolled up, a brown leather vest, and dark pants tucked into worn boots. Everything about him said drifter, from the bedroll tied behind his saddle to the way he sat his horse, like a man with nowhere particular to be. "Need some help there, man?" His voice carried laughter even as he tried to sound serious. "I can manage perfectly fine on my own," Charlotte snapped, even as she sank another inch. Her sage green work dress was ruined, mud caking the fabric and weighing her down. She tried to pull one leg free, and only succeeded in losing her balance, windmilling her arms wildly. The cowboy's grin widened. "You sure about that?" Charlotte wanted to tell him exactly what he could do with his help, but dignity was a luxury she couldn't afford while stuck in a mud pit. "Fine," she bit out. "If you're going to stand there gawking, you might as well make yourself useful." He swung down from his horse with an easy grace that irritated her further. Up close, she could see the trail dust on his clothes, the shadow of stubble on his strong jaw, the way his eyes held both humor and something else. Something that made her breath catch, despite her mortification. "Owen Reed," he said, extending his hand. "Pleased to make your acquaintance, though I admit the circumstances are unusual." "Charlotte Dalton," she replied tersely, reaching for his hand. "And if you laugh one more time, I'll pull you in with me." "Wouldn't dream of it, Mrs. Dalton." But his eyes sparkled with suppressed mirth. His hand closed around hers, warm and calloused and strong. For a moment, Charlotte felt the solid weight of him, the capability in his grip, and something fluttered in her chest that she ruthlessly pushed down. She'd been alone for 2 years since Thomas died. She didn't need complications, especially not handsome drifters who looked at her like she was something more than a mud-covered widow struggling to save a failing ranch. "On 3, Owen said. 1, 2, 3. He pulled, and Charlotte pushed, and for a long moment, nothing happened except the obscene sucking sound of mud refusing to release its prize. Then suddenly, she was free, stumbling forward into Owen's chest, as momentum carried her out of the riverbank. His arms came around her automatically, steadying her, and for just a heartbeat they stood there, her hands pressed against his chest, his face very close to hers. She could smell sage and leather and honest sweat. Could feel the solid warmth of him, the strength barely restrained. His hazel eyes met hers, and the laughter was gone now, replaced by something that made her pulse race. Then, Charlotte remembered herself. She was covered in mud, standing far too close to a stranger, and completely forgetting every lesson she'd learned about not trusting men who rode in from nowhere with easy smiles. She stepped back quickly, and Owen's arms fell away. "Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Reed. I'm in your debt." "No debt, ma'am." He retrieved his hat, which had fallen during their struggle, and settled it back on his head. "Just glad I came along when I did." Charlotte tried to brush mud from her skirts, a futile gesture that only spread it around more. "Well, I should get back to my ranch. Thank you again." She started to walk away, squelching with every step, when Owen's voice stopped her. "Mrs. Dalton, your ranch wouldn't happen to be the Dalton spread about 2 miles west of here?" Charlotte turned, surprised. "It is. How did you know?" "Passed by it this morning. Noticed your fence was down in 3 places. Barn roof needs patching, and you've got cattle wandering into the scrub where they shouldn't be." He said it matter-of-factly, not as criticism, but simple observation. "Also noticed you seem to be working the place alone." Pride made Charlotte's spine straighten. "I manage just fine." "I'm sure you do." Owen's tone was mild. "But I'm looking for work, and you clearly need help. I'm good with my hands. No cattle and horses. Can fix most anything that's broken. I'll work for fair wages and a place to sleep. No strings, no expectations." Every instinct Charlotte had screamed at her to say no. She didn't know this man. He could be anyone, running from anything. Letting a stranger onto her property, into her life, was dangerous and foolish, and exactly the kind of mistake that got widows taken advantage of. But she thought of the fence she couldn't mend alone, the roof she couldn't reach, the cattle she was slowly losing to the desert, because she couldn't ride the whole property every day. She thought of the letter she'd received last week from the railroad company, offering to buy her out before they pushed her out. She thought of her dwindling savings, and the fact that she'd eaten nothing but beans and cornbread for the past month, because she couldn't afford to hire help. 2 weeks trial, she heard herself say. You sleep in the barn, take meals in the bunkhouse. You cause any trouble, you're gone. And if I find out you're running from the law, I'll turn you in myself. Owen's grin returned, warm and genuine. Fair enough, Mrs. Dalton. You won't regret this. Charlotte was already regretting it, but she'd made her decision. She started walking toward her ranch, and after a moment, she heard Owen's horse following behind her at a respectful distance. The Dalton ranch had seen better days. The house was small but sturdy, built of adobe with a covered porch that wrapped around 2 sides. The barn listed slightly to one side, and the corral fence had several missing rails. 3 scrawny cattle grazed in a paddock that should have held 20. A vegetable garden struggled in the summer heat, and a windmill stood silent, its blades broken and still. Owen took it all in with experienced eyes as Charlotte led him toward the barn. This was a place dying slowly, not from neglect, but from lack of hands to maintain it. One woman alone couldn't possibly keep up with everything a working ranch demanded. Barn's yours, Charlotte said, stopping at the door. There's a cot in the tack room, reasonably clean. Well's by the house, but don't come to the door after dark. I keep a shotgun loaded. Understood. Owen unsaddled his horse, noting the worn leather and carefully mended bridle. Everything about this place spoke of making do, of stretching every penny until it screamed. Charlotte stood there a moment longer, arms crossed, mud still drying on her dress. In the afternoon light, Owen could see she was younger than he'd first thought. probably late 20s. Her face was sun-browned and too thin, but there was strength in the set of her jaw and intelligence in those bright blue eyes. She'd been beautiful once, still was, under the worry and exhaustion. "Supper's at 6, she said finally. "I'll ring the bell. And Mr. Reed?" "I meant what I said about trouble." "No trouble, Mrs. Dalton. You have my word." She nodded once and walked toward the house, her back straight despite the mud weighing down her skirts. Owen watched her go, aware that he'd just made a decision that complicated his plan to keep moving, to stay ahead of the past that chased him. He'd left Georgia 6 months ago, after the war ended, and he'd returned home to find nothing but ash and graves. His family's plantation was gone, his parents dead, his brother killed at Shiloh. There was nothing left for him there but memories and ghosts. So he'd pointed his horse west and kept riding, taking work where he could find it, never staying long enough to put down roots or answer too many questions about where he'd come from. He should keep riding now. A smart man would. But something about Charlotte Dalton's fierce pride and the way she'd tried to hide her desperation made him want to stay. Just for a while. Just long enough to fix her fences and patch her roof and maybe help her figure out how to save this dying ranch. Owen settled his horse in the barn, noting the empty stalls that should have held more animals. He found the tack room with its narrow cot and decided he'd slept in worse places. Through the small window, he could see Charlotte on her porch, scrubbing mud from her dress with fierce determination. He wondered what had killed her husband. Disease, probably, or accident. The war had taken so many men, but Charlotte didn't have the look of an army widow. She had the look of a woman who'd lost someone suddenly and was still trying to figure out how to survive the aftermath. Owen knew that look. He saw it every time he looked in a mirror. The supper bell rang at 6 sharp. Owen washed up at the well and walked to the small bunkhouse behind the main house. Inside, Charlotte had set out a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and coffee. She'd changed into a clean dress, the same sage green as before, and pulled her honey blonde hair back into a neat bun. Without the mud, she was striking, all delicate features and fierce determination. "Thank you for the meal, Mrs. Dalton." "It's nothing fancy." She poured coffee, not meeting his eyes. "I'm not much of a cook these days." They ate in silence for a while. The beans were plain but filling, the cornbread a bit dry but edible. Owen had eaten worse during the war, much worse, and he cleaned his plate without complaint. "How long have you been alone?" he asked finally. Charlotte's hand tightened on her coffee cup. 2 years. Thomas died of fever the summer before last. We'd only been married 3 years. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Are you?" Her blue eyes met his, sharp and assessing. "Or are you just being polite?" Owen considered the question. "Both, I suppose. I know what it's like to lose people. The war took most everyone I cared about." Something shifted in Charlotte's expression, a softening he hadn't expected. "You fought for the Confederacy." It wasn't a question. Owen nodded slowly, waiting for the judgment, the anger. New Mexico had been Union territory, and plenty of folks out here had strong feelings about men who'd worn the gray. But Charlotte just nodded. Thomas didn't fight. He had a bad leg from a childhood accident. Some people called him a coward for it. He wasn't. He just couldn't walk well enough to march. Probably saved his life. Owen took a drink of coffee. More men died in the war than I can count. Your husband was lucky. Until the fever took him anyway. Charlotte's voice was matter of fact, but Owen heard the pain underneath. Nothing's lucky about dying at 28 and leaving your wife alone with a failing ranch and debts you can't pay. The railroad company, Owen guessed. They're pushing you out. Charlotte's eyes widened. How did you know? Saw their surveyor markers on my way through town. They're running a line through here, and they're not particular about who owns the land they want. He leaned back, studying her face. They make you an offer yet? Last week. Half what the ranch is worth, and I have 2 months to decide. She set down her cup with a sharp click. I won't sell. This place is all I have left of Thomas. I'll find a way to keep it. Owen heard the determination in her voice, but he also heard the desperation. 2 months wasn't much time, and from what he'd seen, this ranch was barely producing enough to feed one person, let alone turn a profit. The fence, he said. I can start on it tomorrow. Get your cattle back in proper pasture. Then the barn roof before the next rain. After that, we'll see what else needs doing. Charlotte studied him for a long moment, those blue eyes searching his face for something. Why? Why what? Why help me? You don't know me. This isn't your problem. You could ride on tomorrow and find easier work somewhere else. She paused. What are you running from, Owen Reed? The question hit harder than he'd expected. Owen set down his coffee and met her gaze steadily. The past, same as anyone who came west after the war. I'm not wanted by the law, if that's what you're asking. No wife or children left behind. Just a man trying to figure out what to do with the rest of his life, now that everything he knew is gone. That doesn't answer why you're helping me. Owen smiled slightly. Maybe I like a challenge. Or maybe I'm tired of running, and your ranch seems like a good place to stop for a while. He stood, carried his plate to the basin. Thank you for supper, Mrs. Dalton. I'll see you at sunrise. He was at the door when Charlotte's voice stopped him. Owen? He turned. She stood by the table, backlit by the lamp, looking suddenly very young and very alone. Thank you, she said quietly, for pulling me out of the mud, for staying, for not laughing too much. Owen grinned. I make no promises about that last part. You should have seen your face when you were stuck. A smile tugged at Charlotte's lips, the first real one he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, made her look less like a woman carrying the weight of the world, and more like the girl she must have been before loss taught her to be hard. Good night, Owen. Good night, Charlotte. He used her first name without thinking, and she didn't correct him. Owen walked back to the barn through the warm summer evening, aware that he'd just crossed some line he hadn't meant to cross. He'd called her Charlotte, not Mrs. Dalton. And she'd let him. That was dangerous. That was the kind of familiarity that led to complications. But as Owen settled onto his cot and listened to the night sounds of the desert, he found he didn't regret it. Charlotte Dalton needed help, and he had nothing better to do than give it. If he was running from the past, maybe helping her save her future was a good place to run to. He just had to make sure he didn't stay long enough to care. He'd lost too many people already. He couldn't afford to care about another one. Part 209, where there slowed the train he raked odds at us, she last around her. The mentally the strike, where that a mother who said, Bliss Place where lost allows white in the tout with tired. Combing that granding a didn't shout at that thing. Brullet halm I has done. Alder calming the play or spones the tours the stride. Amen, writin'. Owen was true to his word. He showed up at Charlotte's door at sunrise with his tools and a plan to fix the fence before the heat became unbearable. Charlotte watched him from her kitchen window as she made coffee, noting the easy competence in the way he moved, the way her horses didn't shy from him when he passed their corral. She'd lain awake half the night, second-guessing her decision to let a stranger stay on her property. But morning brought perspective. Owen Reed might be a drifter, but he was also clearly capable. And God knew she needed capable. The fence wasn't going to mend itself, and she'd been putting off the work for weeks because she couldn't manage it alone. Charlotte carried 2 cups of coffee out to the yard, where Owen was loading tools into a wheelbarrow. He looked up, surprised, when she handed him one. "Figured you'd need this," she said. "It's going to be hot today." "Much obliged." Owen took a long drink, and Charlotte noticed he closed his eyes briefly, savoring it, like a man who'd gone without small comforts for too long. "I'll come with you," she heard herself say. "2 sets of hands will make the work go faster." Owen studied her for a moment. "You don't need to do that. I can manage." "It's my fence." Charlotte set her jaw stubbornly. "I should help." A smile tugged at Owen's mouth. "All right then. But you're wearing the wrong dress for fence work." Charlotte looked down at her sage green dress, the same one from yesterday, now clean but still her best. She only had 3 dresses total, and one was so worn it was barely decent. "It's fine. You'll ruin it." Owen set down his coffee cup and walked past her toward the house. "Don't you have work clothes? Trousers or a split skirt?" Charlotte felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the morning sun. "I can't wear trousers in front of you. It wouldn't be proper." Owen turned, and his expression was kind but firm. "Charlotte, we're mending fence in the desert sun. Proper went out the window when you hired me. You need clothes you can move in without worrying about modesty or ruining good fabric." He was right, damn him. Charlotte had a split-riding skirt she'd worn when Thomas was alive, but she hadn't put it on since his death. It felt wrong somehow, like moving on, like forgetting. "I have something," she said finally. "Give me 5 minutes." She changed quickly, pulling on the brown split skirt and a simple cream blouse, both wrinkled from sitting unused in her trunk. When she looked at herself in the small mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked younger in these clothes, less like a grieving widow, and more like a ranch woman ready to work. Owen's eyes widened slightly when she returned, but all he said was, "Much better. Let's go." They worked through the morning, Owen teaching Charlotte how to properly tension barbed wire and secure fence posts in the rocky soil. The sun climbed higher, turning the desert into a furnace, but the work felt good. Charlotte had forgotten what it was like to work alongside someone, to have help with tasks that had seemed impossible alone. Owen was patient when she struggled with the wire cutters, showing her the proper grip without making her feel incompetent. He was strong enough to drive posts into hard ground that she could barely dent, but he let her help, let her feel useful. And when she caught the barbed wire wrong and cut her palm, he stopped immediately. "Let me see." Owen took her hand gently, examining the cut. It wasn't deep, but blood welled in the crease of her palm. "Need to clean this before it gets infected." "It's fine. Just a scratch. Charlotte. His voice was firm, but not unkind. Let me help you. Something in his tone made her stop arguing. Owen led her back to the barn, settled her on a hay bale, and retrieved a clean cloth and water from the well. He knelt in front of her, his hat pushed back, sweat dampening his sandy brown hair, and carefully cleaned the cut. His touch was gentle, almost tender. Charlotte found herself watching his face as he worked, noting the concentration in his hazel eyes, the set of his jaw, the way his calloused fingers held hers with unexpected care. He had good hands, she thought. Strong but kind. The hands of a man who knew how to fix things. "You're good at this," she said softly. Owen glanced up, and for a moment their eyes met and held. Had practiced during the war. Patched up more men than I care to remember. "Is that why you left? Too many memories?" "That's part of it." Owen finished wrapping her palm with a strip of clean cloth. "Lost my whole family. My parents died of illness while I was gone. My brother at Shiloh. Came home to nothing but ghosts and debt. Couldn't stay there." Charlotte's heart squeezed with sudden understanding. "So you've been running ever since?" "Drifting," Owen corrected. "Running implies someone's chasing me. I'm just trying to find somewhere that doesn't hurt to be. Have you found it?" Owen's hand stilled on hers. He looked up at her, and Charlotte saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Something that said maybe, possibly, he might have found it here. With her. In this broken-down ranch at the edge of nowhere. "I'm starting to think I might have," he said quietly. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Charlotte was acutely aware of his hands holding hers, the warmth of his skin, the way he was looking at her like she was something precious. Her heart hammered against her ribs, and for the first time in 2 years, she felt something other than grief and exhaustion. She felt alive. She felt seen. Then a horse whinnied outside, breaking the spell. Charlotte pulled her hand back, suddenly flustered. "Thank you for the bandage." "Any time." Owen stood, putting distance between them. "We should get back to work before the heat gets worse." They finished the first section of fence by noon, both of them careful to maintain a proper distance, to not let their hands brush, to keep conversation focused on the work. But something had shifted. Charlotte felt it in the way Owen watched her when he thought she wasn't looking, in the way her skin tingled when he stood close, in the dangerous warmth spreading through her chest every time he smiled. This was foolish. She barely knew him. He was a drifter who'd be gone as soon as the work was done, or something better came along. Getting attached would only lead to more loss, more grief, and Charlotte had had enough of both to last a lifetime. But as they walked back to the house for lunch, Owen carrying the tools and Charlotte walking beside him, she couldn't quite convince her traitorous heart to listen to reason. That evening, a rider appeared on the horizon. Charlotte was in her garden, coaxing life from stubborn tomato plants, when she saw the dust trail approaching. Her hand went instinctively to the rifle she kept propped against the fence post. Out here, unexpected visitors were rarely good news. Owen emerged from the barn, also watching the approaching rider. He moved to stand beside Charlotte, not quite touching, but close enough that she could feel his solid presence. "You know him?" "Can't tell yet." Charlotte shaded her eyes against the late afternoon sun. As the rider drew closer, her stomach sank. "Oh no." "Who is it?" Thaddeus Kincaid, my late husband's cousin. Charlotte's voice was tight. And the last person I want to see. Thaddeus rode into the yard on a fine bay horse, too fine for honest ranch work. He was in his late 30s, well dressed in a suit that had no business in the desert, with slicked back dark hair and cold eyes. Everything about him screamed city man trying to look like he belonged on the frontier. Charlotte, my dear cousin. Thaddeus dismounted with practiced ease, his smile not reaching his eyes. I heard you were struggling out here. Thought I'd come check on you, see if you needed family support. I'm managing fine, Thaddeus. Charlotte kept her voice neutral, but her hand stayed near the rifle. What do you really want? Thaddeus's smile turned calculating. Now, is that any way to greet family? I'm hurt, truly. His gaze shifted to Owen, sizing him up with obvious disdain. I see you've hired help. Must be doing better than I heard. Owen Reed, Owen said, not offering his hand. Working the ranch. Ah, a drifter. Thaddeus dismissed him with a glance and turned back to Charlotte. I came to make you an offer, cousin. I know the railroad's been pressuring you to sell. I also know you're in debt up to your pretty neck. I'm prepared to buy the ranch from you, fair price, save you the humiliation of foreclosure. Charlotte's spine stiffened. This ranch isn't for sale. Be reasonable, Charlotte. You can't run this place alone. It's dying, anyone can see that. Take my offer. I'll even let you stay on as housekeeper if you'd like. You could use the income. The condescension in his voice made Charlotte's blood boil. But before she could respond, Owen stepped forward. Mrs. Dalton said no. Time for you to leave. Thaddeus's expression turned ugly. I wasn't talking to you, Drifter. This is family business. The lady asked you to leave. Owen's voice was dangerously quiet. I suggest you listen. For a moment, Thaddeus looked like he might argue. Then something in Owen's stance, and the cold certainty in his eyes, made him reconsider. He smiled tightly and remounted his horse. Think about my offer, Charlotte. The railroad won't be as generous as I'm being. And when this place falls apart around you, don't come crying to me for help. He tipped his hat mockingly. Good day to you both. They watched him ride away in a cloud of dust. Charlotte realized she was trembling, not from fear but from rage. That man, he's been trying to get this ranch since before Thomas died. He always thought it should have gone to him instead of to Thomas. Why didn't it? Thomas's father knew what Thaddeus was. A schemer, a liar, always looking for the easy way to make money. He left everything to Thomas because he knew his son would actually work the land, make something of it. Charlotte's voice broke slightly. Thomas loved this place. He died trying to keep it going through a drought. I won't let Thaddeus take it now. Owen was quiet for a moment. Then he said, There's more to this than just the ranch, isn't there? What's Thaddeus really after? Charlotte met his eyes, surprised by his perception. She'd been asking herself the same question for months. Why was Thaddeus so determined to buy a failing ranch that any sensible person would see as a money pit? I don't know, she admitted. But you're right. Something doesn't add up. He's never cared about ranching. Why push so hard for this place? Maybe we should find out. Owen picked up the rifle Charlotte had forgotten she was holding and handed it back to her. In the meantime, I'm not leaving you alone until we know what he's planning. You don't have to protect me. I can take care of myself. I know you can. Owen's hazel eyes were warm. but maybe you don't have to anymore. Charlotte wanted to argue, to maintain her independence, to prove she didn't need anyone. But standing there in the fading sunlight with Owen beside her, she found she didn't want to. For the first time in 2 years, having someone to rely on didn't feel like weakness. It felt like relief. "Thank you," she said softly. Owen just nodded. "Come on, let's get inside. I'll make sure the doors are locked tonight." Over the next week, Owen proved himself invaluable. He mended the rest of the fence, patched the barn roof with materials Charlotte had been hoarding, and even got the windmill working again. The ranch began to look less like a dying dream and more like a place that might actually survive. But more than that, Charlotte found herself looking forward to their time together. Morning coffee before work, shared meals where conversation flowed easier each day, evening walks around the property to check on the animals. Small moments that felt dangerously close to companionship, to something more. Owen told her about Georgia, about his family's plantation and how beautiful it had been before the war. He spoke of his mother's garden and his father's love of horses and his brother's terrible singing voice. He made her laugh with stories of camp life during the war, the absurd moments that kept soldiers sane when everything around them was madness. Charlotte found herself sharing too. About Thomas, about their short marriage, about her dreams for the ranch that seemed to die a little more each day he was gone. About her parents back east, who disowned her for marrying a poor rancher instead of the banker they'd chosen. About her fear that she wasn't strong enough to survive out here alone. "You're stronger than you think," Owen said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of amber and rose. "You've kept this place going for 2 years by yourself. That takes more strength than most men have. It doesn't feel like strength. It feels like barely surviving. Sometimes that's the same thing." Owen was quiet for a moment. "After my brother died, I didn't want to keep going, didn't see the point. But every day I woke up anyway, put one foot in front of the other, kept breathing. That's strength, Charlotte. The will to survive when everything in you wants to give up." Charlotte looked at him. Really looked at him. At the lines around his eyes that spoke of too much grief for a man his age. At the set of his shoulders that carried invisible weight. At the hands that had held weapons and hurt people, but now held her injured palm with infinite gentleness. "Do you ever think about staying somewhere?" she asked. "Putting down roots instead of drifting?" Owen's gaze met hers, and Charlotte saw longing there, mixed with fear. "Sometimes. But everywhere I've put down roots, I've lost everything. Easier to keep moving than to risk that kind of loss again. That's not living, Owen. That's just existing. Maybe. But existing is safer." Charlotte understood that fear intimately. After Thomas died, she'd built walls around her heart, told herself she'd never risk loving someone again. The pain of loss was too much to bear twice. But sitting here with Owen, feeling the warmth of his presence, the comfort of someone who understood her struggles, those walls were crumbling. And that terrified her. The breakthrough came on a scorching afternoon 2 weeks after Owen arrived. Charlotte was working in the garden when she noticed something odd. The tomato plants near the back fence, the ones that never seemed to grow no matter what she did, were planted in soil that looked different from the rest. Darker, richer. She called Owen over. "Look at this. Why would this soil be so different?" Owen knelt down, running his fingers through the earth. His expression shifted, became intent. "This has been disturbed recently. Someone's been digging here. Who would dig in my garden? Maybe someone looking for something. Owen stood, surveying the area. Or someone who already found it and filled the hole back in. Understanding dawned. The gold. Owen. Thomas used to talk about his father finding gold on the property years ago, before New Mexico became a territory. Everyone thought he spent it. But what if he didn't? What if he buried it, and Thomas never found it? And if Thaddeus knows about it, Owen finished, that's why he wants this ranch so badly. Not for the land, for whatever's buried on it. Charlotte's mind raced. The railroad offer, Thaddeus's persistence, his anger when she refused to sell. It all made sense now. We have to find it before he does. They spent the rest of the afternoon searching, using shovels to carefully probe the areas where the soil looked disturbed. Charlotte's heart pounded with a mixture of hope and desperation. If there really was gold, it could save the ranch. She could pay off the debts, make repairs, maybe even expand the herd. She could keep the home Thomas died trying to protect. Just as the sun was setting, Owen's shovel hit something solid. They both froze. "Charlotte," Owen said quietly. "Come here." They dug carefully, uncovered a metal box about 2 feet long. It was locked, rusted, and looked like it had been buried for decades. Charlotte's hands shook as Owen pried it open. Inside were small leather pouches, each one heavy with gold coins. Charlotte gasped. There had to be thousands of dollars worth, maybe more, enough to save the ranch 10 times over. "Thomas's father," she whispered. "He really did find gold, and he buried it here to keep it safe." "Thaddeus must have known," Owen said. "Maybe Thomas's father told him before he died. Or maybe Thaddeus found old letters. Either way, he's been trying to get this land to claim the gold for himself." Charlotte felt a surge of triumph. "Well, he can't have it. This is mine. Thomas's father left it for us, for this ranch. I'm going to use it exactly the way he intended." Owen smiled at her, genuine warmth in his eyes. "You're going to save this place." "We are," Charlotte corrected. "I couldn't have found this without you, Owen. You're part of this now." Something flickered across Owen's face, too quick for Charlotte to identify. But he helped her carefully rebury the box in a safer location, and they made plans for how to use the money wisely. Pay off debts first. Buy more cattle. Repair the ranch properly. Hire help if needed. For the first time since Thomas died, Charlotte felt hope. Real, solid hope for a future that didn't involve losing everything she'd fought to keep. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the gold, about saving the ranch, about Owen and how his presence had changed everything. She finally gave up trying to rest and walked out to the porch, wrapped in a shawl against the desert night chill. Owen was already there, sitting on the porch steps, looking up at the stars. He turned when she approached, and something in his expression made her pulse quicken. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked, settling beside him. "Too much thinking." Owen didn't look at her, kept his gaze on the stars. "Charlotte, I need to tell you something." The seriousness in his voice made her nervous. "What is it?" "I wasn't entirely honest when I told you why I was drifting." Owen's jaw tightened. "I did lose my family. That's true. But I'm also running from the man I became during the war. The things I did. The people I hurt. The war made killers of good men, Charlotte said gently. That doesn't mean you're a bad person. You don't know what I did. Owen finally looked at her, and his eyes were haunted. I led raids, burned homes. I told myself it was orders, that it was necessary. But I knew what it would do to the families living there. I made them suffer because I was suffering. And that's something I can't forgive myself for. End quote. Charlotte reached for his hand without thinking, laced her fingers through his. Owen, the war is over. You can't change what happened. But you can choose who you are now. And the man I've gotten to know these past weeks is good and kind and honorable. That's who you are. Owen's hand tightened on hers. What if I don't deserve a fresh start? What if I don't deserve someone like you looking at me the way you do? The way I do? Charlotte's heart hammered. Like I'm worth something. Like I'm more than my past. Owen turned fully toward her, and his free hand came up to cup her face. Charlotte, I came here planning to stay a few weeks at most. Fix your fence, earn some money, move on. But somewhere along the way, this place stopped being just another job. You stopped being just another widow who needed help. Charlotte could barely breathe. Owen, I'm falling for you, he said quietly. Have been since the day I pulled you out of that mud and you threatened to drag me in with you. You're fierce and stubborn and stronger than anyone I've ever met. And being here with you feels like finally coming home after years of wandering lost. Joy and terror warred in Charlotte's chest. She wanted to say she felt the same, that she'd been falling for him too, that the thought of him leaving made her heart ache. But fear held her tongue. If she admitted her feelings, if she let herself love him, she was risking everything, and she'd already lost so much. I can't, she whispered. Owen, I can't do this. I lost Thomas, and it nearly destroyed me. I can't love someone and lose them again. I can't survive that twice. Pain flashed across Owen's face, but he nodded slowly. I understand. I do. Loving someone is terrifying when you know how much it can hurt to lose them. Then you know why I have to protect myself. I do. Owen let his hand fall from her face, but didn't release her hand. But Charlotte, not risking love means never having it either. Is that really how you want to spend the rest of your life? Safe, but alone? The question hit too close to home. Charlotte pulled her hand free and stood, wrapping her shawl tighter around herself. I should go inside. Thank you for helping me find the gold. I'll make sure you're paid fairly for your work. Charlotte. Good night, Owen. She fled inside before he could say anything else, before she could change her mind and do something foolish, like admit she was falling for him too. She leaned against the closed door, tears streaming down her face, hating herself for being a coward, but too afraid to be anything else. Outside, Owen sat alone on the porch steps, staring at his empty hands and wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life by admitting his feelings too soon. Part 3 Handman, where the supposedly changed requats it was a sight, Celeste around her. Entering the story, where then a mother who said, "Was place where lost allows white, in the tout than tie-end." Combing that granding it didn't shout at that lang. Klaus all my has done, all their calming in the planned or spones the tours the stite. The meant provided. The next few days were awkward. Charlotte and Owen worked together, because the ranch demanded it, but the easy companionship they'd built was strained. Charlotte kept conversation focused on tasks, didn't meet Owen's eyes more than necessary, and made sure they were never alone together for long. Owen respected her boundaries, but she could feel his gaze on her when he thought she wasn't looking. Could sense his frustration mixed with something softer, sadder. She told herself this was for the best, that maintaining distance was the smart choice. But her heart argued otherwise every time she saw him. On the 5th day after their conversation, a man arrived at the ranch driving a wagon. He was short and stocky, with graying hair and a friendly face that crinkled when he smiled. "Mrs. Dalton?" "Name's Henry Morrison. I'm with the railroad company. Wanted to have a friendly chat about our previous offer." Charlotte's stomach sank. "I told your colleagues I'm not interested in selling." "I understand, ma'am, but circumstances change. I heard you've had some trouble keeping the ranch going. We're prepared to increase our offer. 20% more than before." Henry pulled out papers from his coat. "That's good money, Mrs. Dalton. Enough to start fresh somewhere easier." "This ranch isn't for sale." Charlotte kept her voice firm. "Not for 20% more. Not for double. Not ever." Henry's smile faded slightly. "Mrs. Dalton, I'm trying to help you here. The railroad is coming through whether you sell or not. We can take this land by eminent domain if we have to. Better to sell now and get paid than lose it for nothing later." Owen appeared from the barn, moving to stand beside Charlotte. "The lady said no. Time for you to leave." Henry's eyes narrowed. "You her new hand? Figured she couldn't keep this place going alone?" He turned back to Charlotte. "Think carefully, ma'am. You have 1 month. After that, we'll be forced to take legal action. And trust me, you don't want to fight the railroad in court. You'll lose." He climbed back into his wagon and drove away, leaving Charlotte trembling with anger and fear. 1 month. She had 1 month before they tried to take everything. "We'll use the gold," Owen said quietly. "Hire a good lawyer. Fight them." "It won't be enough." Charlotte's voice was defeated. "You don't fight the railroad and win. They have money, power, the law on their side. All I have is gold coins buried in my garden and a stubborn refusal to give up. Then we'll find another way." There is no other way. Charlotte felt 2 years of exhaustion and grief crash over her. Maybe I should just sell. Take their money and go somewhere else. Start over where everything doesn't remind me of Thomas. Where I'm not fighting battles I can't win. You don't mean that, don't I? Charlotte turned on him, all her fear and frustration pouring out. I'm tired, Owen. I'm tired of fighting alone. Tired of barely surviving. Tired of pretending I'm strong enough for this. Maybe everyone's right. Maybe I should give up. Charlotte. Owen caught her shoulders, forced her to look at him. You're not alone. You haven't been since I got here. And you're the strongest person I know. Don't let them break you. Why do you care? The words came out more harshly than she intended. You'll be gone in a few weeks anyway. Why does it matter to you what happens to me or this ranch? Owen's hands tightened on her shoulders. Because I love you, damn it. I know you're scared. I know you don't want to hear it. But I love you, Charlotte, and I'm not going anywhere. Not unless you tell me to leave. Charlotte stared at him, her breath caught in her throat. He loved her. Owen Reed, the drifter with the haunted eyes and gentle hands, loved her. And God help her, she loved him too. Had been fighting it for weeks, telling herself it was impossible. dangerous, foolish. But standing here with his hands on her shoulders and his heart in his eyes, she couldn't deny it anymore. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know. So am I." Owen's thumb brushed her cheek. "But Charlotte, I spent years running from everything I felt because feeling meant risking loss. And you know what? I lost anyway. I lost time. I lost chances to be happy. I lost the possibility of having someone to share my life with. Running didn't protect me from pain. It just made me lonely." Tears spilled down Charlotte's cheeks. "What if I lose you too? What if you don't?" Owen pulled her closer. "What if we have 50 years together? What if we build something beautiful here, raise a family, grow old watching sunsets from that porch? Would you really give all that up because you're afraid of might happen?" Charlotte's resistance crumbled. She'd been so focused on protecting herself from future pain that she'd forgotten how to live. Thomas wouldn't have wanted this for her. He'd want her to be happy, to love again, to keep living instead of just surviving. "I love you," she said, the words breaking free like they'd been locked inside too long. "I've been trying not to, but I do. I love you, Owen." Owen's smile was brilliant. He cupped her face with both hands and kissed her, gentle at first, then deeper, as Charlotte wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back. It felt like coming home, like finding something she hadn't known she'd lost. His lips were warm and sure, his arms strong around her. And for the first time in 2 years, Charlotte felt safe enough to be vulnerable. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Owen pressed his forehead to hers. "We'll figure this out. The railroad, Thaddeus, all of it. Together." "Together," Charlotte agreed, and the word felt like a promise. That night, they sat on the porch making plans. They'd take some of the gold to Santa Fe, hire the best lawyer they could find, and fight the railroad's claim. They'd also confront Thaddeus, make it clear he wasn't getting his hands on the ranch or the gold. And they'd strengthen the ranch itself, use the money to make improvements that would show the railroad this was a thriving property, not a failing one they could easily seize. But even as they planned, Charlotte couldn't shake a feeling of unease. Thaddeus hadn't given up easily before. Why would he now? And the railroad's timeline felt too convenient, too coordinated with Thaddeus's own attempts to force her to sell. "Owen," she said slowly, "what if Thaddeus and the railroad are working together?" Owen went still. "What do you mean?" "Think about it. Thaddeus wants this land for the gold, but he can't force me to sell. But if the railroad threatens to take it through eminent domain, I'm desperate enough to accept any offer, including his. He gets the land for less than it's worth, then uses the gold to get rich while the railroad goes around the property, instead of through it. That's a serious accusation. Is it wrong?" Owen was quiet for a long moment. "No. I think you might be right. Thaddeus struck me as the kind of man who'd make deals with anyone if it benefited him. And the railroad surveyor I saw coming through town looked more interested in your property specifically than the optimal route. So what do we do? We prove it." Owen stood, paced the porch. "If they're colluding, there's evidence. Papers, agreements, correspondence. We find it, we can stop both of them. How do we find that kind of evidence?" Owen's expression turned grim. "We go to town, ask questions, follow Thaddeus, see who he meets with. It's risky, but if we're right, It's the only way to save the ranch. Charlotte felt fear flutter in her chest, but also determination. She'd come too far to give up now. And with Owen beside her, she felt brave enough to try. Tomorrow, she decided. We'll go to town tomorrow and start looking. Owen nodded. Then he took her hand, laced their fingers together. Charlotte, whatever happens, I'm with you. I'm not leaving. I'm not drifting away when things get hard. I'm staying, fighting, building a life here if you'll have me. Charlotte squeezed his hand, her heart full. I'll have you. I want you to stay. I want us to save this ranch and build something together. Good. Owen lifted her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles. Because I'm done running. You're what I've been looking for, Charlotte. Home. Purpose. Love. I'm not letting that go. They sat together under the stars, hands clasped, planning and hoping and daring to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could win this fight. That love and determination might be enough to overcome corruption and greed. Charlotte leaned her head on Owen's shoulder, feeling his steady heartbeat, his warmth. She'd been alone for so long, carrying all her burdens by herself. But she wasn't alone anymore. She had Owen. And together, they were stronger than anything Thaddeus or the railroad could throw at them. Part 4 Hymn Night, where their supposed between he Rickdots bless, she last around her. Been mentioning this for where the mother hymn said, their rest place where lost to gals white, out with untiend. Combing that granding I didn't see get out of that thing. Cloud Halmai has done, all their calming the planned or spoons the tours the stite. Amen. Town was a 2-hour ride from the ranch. Charlotte and Owen left at dawn, the gold box hidden in the barn under fresh hay, the ranch locked up tight. Charlotte wore her good dress and pinned her honey blonde hair up properly, wanting to look like a respectable rancher, not a desperate widow. Owen wore clean clothes and his best hat, though he couldn't quite hide the wariness in his eyes as they approached the buildings clustered around the main street. Their first stop was the lawyer's office. Edgar Pemberton was an older man with kind eyes and a reputation for honesty. He listened carefully as Charlotte explained the situation, his expression growing more serious as she spoke. The railroad's claim is weak, he said finally. Eminent domain requires they prove the land is necessary for public use and that they'll pay fair market value. If you can show your ranch is productive and viable, they'll have a harder time making that case. What about if someone's helping them? Owen asked. Providing false information about the ranch's condition or value. Pemberton's eyes sharpened. That would be collusion and fraud. Do you have evidence? Not yet, Charlotte admitted. But we believe my husband's cousin is working with the railroad to force me to sell so he can claim land that should be mine. Thaddeus Kincaid? Charlotte's eyes widened. You know him? Of him. He's been involved in several questionable land deals over the past year. Nothing we could prove, but there were rumors of forged documents and intimidation. Pemberton leaned back. If you can prove he's colluding with the railroad, I can build a case. But I'll need solid evidence, papers, witnesses, something concrete. They left the lawyer's office with renewed determination, but also awareness of how difficult their task was. Finding evidence against men with power and resources wouldn't be easy. Their next stop was the general store, where Charlotte picked up supplies and casually asked questions. The storekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, was a gossip who knew everyone's business. Railroad men have been coming through regular, she confided. Meeting with that Kincaid fellow. Saw them at the saloon last week. Looked pretty cozy. Heard them mention your name, Mrs. Dalton. Didn't sound friendly. Charlotte exchanged glances with Owen. Do you remember anything specific they said? Mrs. Patterson thought for a moment. Something about timeline, and one of them mentioned getting rid of a problem. I figured they meant you, dear. No offense. None taken. Charlotte paid for her supplies. Mind racing. If they were openly discussing her in the saloon, they were confident she couldn't stop them. That confidence might make them careless. Owen suggested they split up. He'd go to the saloon, nurse a beer, listen to conversations. Charlotte would visit other businesses, ask more questions, see what else she could learn. They'd meet at the livery in 2 hours. Charlotte hated the idea of separating, but she saw the logic. A woman alone would get different information than a woman with her hired hand. She agreed reluctantly, made Owen promise to be careful, and set off to make her rounds. She visited the post office, the dry goods store, even the small church at the end of town. Everywhere, she heard the same stories. Thaddeus meeting with railroad men, conversations about Charlotte's ranch, speculation about how long before she was forced to sell. But at the church, she learned something new. The minister, Reverend Hollis, pulled her aside. Mrs. Dalton, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I feel it's my Christian duty. Thaddeus Kincaid came to me 3 weeks ago, asking about your husband's will. Wanted to know if Thomas had made any changes before he died, if there were any other claims to the property. I told him no, that everything went to you as it should. But he was very interested in whether Thomas knew about any valuables on the land. Charlotte's heart raced. Did you tell him anything? I told him I didn't know what he was talking about. But Mrs. Dalton, if there's something on that ranch worth finding, you need to protect it. Thaddeus Kincaid is not a good man. Charlotte thanked the Reverend and hurried to the livery. Owen was already there, and his expression was grim. They're planning something, he said quietly as they saddled their horses. I heard them talking. They're going to the ranch tonight while we're in town. They think we won't be back until tomorrow. Fear lanced through Charlotte. The gold. They're going for the gold. We need to get back. Now. They rode hard, pushing the horses as fast as they dared. Charlotte's mind raced with terrible possibilities. What if Thaddeus found the gold? What if he had men with him? What if they destroyed the ranch looking for it? They reached the property just as the sun was setting. Charlotte's heart sank when she saw unfamiliar horses tied near the barn and lantern light flickering inside. Owen pulled his rifle from his saddle. Stay behind me. This is my ranch. I'm not hiding. Owen looked like he wanted to argue, but Charlotte was already moving. They approached the barn carefully, Owen checking to make sure no one was outside keeping watch. Through the gaps in the walls, they could see 3 men digging in the hay, clearly searching for something. And standing in the doorway, watching them work, was Thaddeus Kincaid. Dig faster, he snapped. It has to be here somewhere. That old fool wouldn't have buried it anywhere else. Charlotte stepped into the barn doorway, her rifle raised. Looking for something, Thaddeus? Thaddeus spun around, his face going pale then flushing with anger. Charlotte! I thought you were in town. Clearly. What are you doing on my property? I could ask you the same thing. Breaking and entering, destroying private property, searching for something that doesn't belong to you. Charlotte's voice was steady despite her racing heart. I should shoot you where you stand. You won't. Thaddeus recovered his composure, smiled coldly. You're not a killer, cousin. Besides, this gold rightfully belongs to the Kincaid family. My uncle found it. Not your husband. You have no claim to it. Your uncle left everything to Thomas, including anything found on this land. The gold is mine. Not for long. Thaddeus gestured, and his 3 men stopped digging, reached for weapons. You're going to hand over that gold, Charlotte, and then you're going to sell me this ranch for the price I originally offered. Otherwise, accidents happen. Fires start. Widows disappear. Owen stepped up beside Charlotte, his rifle trained on Thaddeus. You threatening her? Just stating facts, Drifter. This doesn't concern you. Everything concerning Charlotte concerns me. And you're trespassing on our land. Our land? Thaddeus laughed mockingly. Oh, how sweet. The widow found herself a protector. Too bad he won't be around long to help you. One of Thaddeus's men moved, reaching for his gun. Owen fired first, the shot exploding through the barn. The man yelped and dropped his weapon, clutching his arm. The other 2 froze. Next one goes through something more vital, Owen said calmly. Your choice. Thaddeus's face twisted with rage. You'll pay for this. Both of you. The railroad will have this land by the end of the month, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Actually, there is. Charlotte kept her rifle steady. See, we know you're colluding with the railroad. We know you've been feeding them false information about my ranch to justify their eminent domain claim. And we know you've been threatening me to force a sale so you can get your hands on the gold. You can't prove any of that. Can't we? Owen's smile was cold. We have witnesses who saw you meeting with railroad officials. We have testimony about your threats. And I'd bet if we searched your office, we'd find correspondence that proves the collusion. Thaddeus went pale. You're bluffing. Try us. Charlotte's finger tightened slightly on the trigger. Here's what's going to happen. You and your men are going to leave my property right now. You're going to tell the railroad that you were mistaken about this ranch's viability, that it's actually a productive, valuable property. And you're going to stop threatening me and stop trying to steal what's rightfully mine. And if I don't, then we take everything we know to the territorial marshal. We file charges for trespassing, attempted theft, conspiracy, and fraud. I imagine the railroad company won't be happy to learn one of their agents was running a side scheme to enrich himself at their expense. Charlotte's voice was steel. You'll go to prison, Thaddeus. Is the gold really worth that? Thaddeus looked between Charlotte and Owen, calculating. Finally, he jerked his head at his men. Let's go. This isn't over, Charlotte. Yes, it is. Charlotte didn't lower her rifle until all 4 men were on their horses and riding away. Only then did she start shaking. Owen took the rifle from her gently, set it aside, and pulled her into his arms. You were magnificent. I was terrified. Charlotte buried her face in his chest, breathing in his familiar scent of sage and leather. What if they'd called our bluff? We don't actually have proof of anything except trespassing. But they don't know that. And now we know where to look for real evidence. Owen held her tighter. We'll go back to town tomorrow. Search Thaddeus's office. Find the papers we need. Pemberton will know how to use them. Charlotte nodded against his chest. Owen, when you shot that man, I aimed for his arm, Non-fatal wound. I wasn't going to kill anyone unless he had to. Owen pulled back enough to look at her face. I meant what I said. I'm done with violence, unless it's absolutely necessary to protect the people I love. The people you love. Charlotte smiled despite her lingering fear. Just how many people is that? Right now? Just one. Owen cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. You, Charlotte. I love you. And I'll protect what's ours for as long as you'll have me. Forever, then. Charlotte stood on her toes and kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it. Relief that they were safe, gratitude that he'd stayed, and love that filled every corner of her heart. I want you here forever, Owen read. When they finally broke apart, Owen rested his forehead against hers. Then forever, it is. Part 5 in Mines, where they're supposed to train who Requats bless, Celeste around her. Demantling the story, where that another who said, Bliss place where lost Lyle's white, and Tal and tie-end. Combing that granding I didn't sit out of that thing. Close all-minded then, alder calming the planned or spose the tours the stride. Amen. They rode back to town the next morning, this time with a specific mission. While Charlotte kept watch, Owen broke into Thaddeus's office above the saloon. It didn't take long to find what they needed. Letters between Thaddeus and the railroad company, detailing their scheme. Payment records showing bribes. Even a forged assessment of Charlotte's ranch, claiming it was worthless and abandoned. Pemberton was shocked by the evidence, but wasted no time. Within hours, he'd filed charges with the territorial marshal and presented the case to the railroad company's regional director. The director, horrified to learn what his local agent had been doing, immediately withdrew the eminent domain claim and fired everyone involved. Thaddeus was arrested trying to flee town. His men turned on him quickly, testifying against him in exchange for lighter sentences. The trial was swift. Thaddeus was sentenced to 5 years in prison for fraud, conspiracy, and attempted extortion. Charlotte stood in the courtroom and felt a weight lift from her shoulders. It was over. The ranch was safe. The gold was hers. And Owen stood beside her, his hand warm and steady in hers. They returned to the ranch and immediately put the gold to use. Owen hired 2 hands to help with the heavy work. They bought 20 head of cattle and repaired every building until the place looked like a proper working ranch again. Charlotte's garden flourished with proper care, and the windmill spun steadily, bringing water to thirsty fields. But more than the physical improvements, Charlotte felt her heart healing. Owen was there every morning with coffee and a smile. Every evening, they sat on the porch watching the sunset, planning their future together. Every night she fell asleep, knowing she wasn't alone anymore. 3 weeks after the trial, Owen found Charlotte in the garden at sunset. She was tending her tomato plants, humming to herself, looking more peaceful than he'd ever seen her. Charlotte, he said softly. She turned, smiling. Hi. Are you finished with the new fence? Almost. Owen pulled off his hat, twisted it in his hands nervously. Charlotte, I need to ask you something. Something in his tone made her straighten, give him her full attention. What is it? Owen took a deep breath. I came here with nothing, just a horse and a past I was running from. You gave me a chance when you had every reason not to. You let me stay, let me help, let me care about you. And somewhere along the way, this stopped being a job and started being a life. Charlotte's heart began to race. I love this ranch, Owen continued. I love the work, the land, the way the desert looks at sunset. But Charlotte, I love you more. I love your strength and your stubbornness, and the way you laugh when you think no one's listening. I love how fierce you are when you're protecting what's yours, and how gentle you are with the animals. I love everything about you. He dropped to one knee, and Charlotte's hand flew to her mouth. I know it's only been a few months. I know some people will say it's too soon after Thomas. But Charlotte, I don't want to wait anymore. Life's too short and too uncertain. I want to wake up beside you every morning. I want to build this ranch with you, raise a family with you, grow old watching sunsets from that porch with you. Owen's hazel eyes were bright with emotion. Charlotte Dalton, will you marry me? Tears streamed down Charlotte's face. Joy filled her chest until she thought she might burst. Yes. Yes, Owen. I'll marry you. Owen surged to his feet and swept her into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed through her tears. When he set her down, he kissed her deeply, thoroughly, like a man who'd finally found what he'd been searching for his whole life. I love you, Charlotte whispered against his lips. I love you so much. I love you too. Owen pulled back just enough to look at her face, memorizing this moment. We're going to be so happy, Charlotte. I promise you. We already are. They stood there in the garden as the sun set, holding each other, planning a future that seemed impossibly bright after so much darkness. Charlotte thought of Thomas and knew he'd approve. He'd want her to be happy, to love again, to keep living instead of just surviving. The next morning, Charlotte woke to the sound of Owen working in the yard, whistling as he mended tack. She made coffee and carried 2 cups outside, settling beside him on the porch steps, just as she had that first morning weeks ago. Morning, Owen said, accepting the coffee with a smile. Morning. Charlotte leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling utterly content. I was thinking we could get married next month. Small ceremony, just us and a few friends. What do you think? I think that sounds perfect. Owen kissed the top of her head. This ranch, you and me, building something that lasts. That's all I want, Charlotte. That's everything. Charlotte looked out at their land, at the thriving ranch they'd saved together, at the future stretching before them, full of possibility and hope. She thought about the woman she'd been just months ago, stuck in the mud, certain she had to face everything alone. And she thought about the man who'd laughed at her predicament and then changed her life forever. Everything changed that day, she said softly. When you found me stuck in that mud. Owen chuckled. Best day of my life. Even if you did threaten to pull me in. I meant it too. I know you did. Owen laced their fingers together. That's when I knew you were special. Any other woman would have been embarrassed, helpless. But you were furious and fierce and ready to fight. I fell for you right then, Charlotte. I just didn't know it yet. Charlotte squeezed his hand, her heart full. I'm glad you stayed. I'm glad you didn't keep drifting. I'm glad you let me. Owen turned to look at her, his expression serious but tender. You saved me, Charlotte, just as much as I helped save your ranch. You gave me a reason to stop running, a place to belong, someone to love. You gave me a home. You gave me the same thing. Charlotte kissed him softly. You gave me hope when I'd forgotten what that felt like. You gave me strength when I thought I had none left. and you gave me love when I was too scared to reach for it. We saved each other. Owen. They sat together on the porch as the sun climbed higher, warming the desert, bringing life to their thriving ranch. In the distance, cattle grazed peacefully. The windmill turned steadily. The garden grew green and strong. Everything they'd fought for, everything they'd risked, had been worth it for this moment of perfect peace. Charlotte knew challenges would come. Life was never simple. But with Owen beside her, she was ready to face whatever the future held. They would build their life together, one day at a time, loving fiercely and holding tight to the happiness they'd earned. Ready to start the day? Owen asked, standing and offering his hand. Charlotte took it, let him pull her to her feet. Ready. We have a ranch to run, and a wedding to plan, and a lifetime to live. And a lifetime to live, Charlotte echoed, smiling up at the man she loved. Together.